Have you ever noticed that once you learn about something new, it suddenly starts popping up everywhere? You buy a red car and suddenly every other car on the road seems to be red. No, it's not magic. It's your brain, constantly playing tricks on you, leveraging a range of clever psychological effects. Today, we're going to uncover some of the most powerful and often invisible of these mental traps. You'll be surprised at how deeply they influence your decisions, shape your thoughts, and even alter your memories. Prepare to gain a new perspective on yourself. So, what exactly are these invisible strings that our own consciousness seems to pull? Essentially, they're mental shortcuts our brain uses to save energy and make quicker decisions. Think of them not as bugs, but as built-in features of our brain's operating system, honed by evolution. And understanding them is the crucial first step to taking control back into your own hands. Let's kick things off with a phenomenon that's incredibly relatable and often quite amusing. Have you ever experienced this? You learn a new word, say petrichor, the distinct scent of earth after rain. Then, almost immediately, you start hearing it everywhere. In podcasts, seeing it in books, or a friend even drops it into conversation. It feels like that word is suddenly stalking you. Or perhaps you decide on a specific car make and model, even a particular colour. For weeks, you barely notice them on the roads. But the moment you make that decision, suddenly they're everywhere. Every street seems to be flooded with them. This, my friends, is what's known as the Baader-Meinhof phenomenon, or, more scientifically, the frequency illusion. So, what's really going on here? Is the universe sending you secret messages? Not quite. The truth is far more grounded, and actually much more fascinating. It all boils down to the pure psychology of how our attention works. Before petrichor or that specific red car held any personal significance for you, your brain simply classified them as background noise and efficiently filtered them out. But the moment that information gained importance in your mind, your brain, like a diligent assistant, flagged it. All right, this is significant. Pay attention. This activates a mechanism known as selective attention. Your focus shifts, and you start actively noticing things that were always there, surrounding you, but simply remained invisible before. Each new coincidence only serves to reinforce this illusion, because our brains absolutely love finding confirmation for their internal hypotheses, and that particular love for confirmation, well, that's another, though very closely related, psychological effect entirely. And this inherent human inclination, we have to seek confirmation. It's an effect that always goes hand in hand with the frequency illusion. It's known as confirmation bias, or the tendency to favour information that supports our existing beliefs. This is one of the most powerful and insidious tricks our minds play on us. Essentially, it's an internal filter that selectively lets in only the information we prefer, information that aligns with our pre-existing convictions. Anything that contradicts those beliefs, our brain either ignores outright or finds 1,000 reasons to dismiss as untrue or irrelevant. Imagine you're wearing glasses that only illuminate evidence supporting your viewpoint. This phenomenon is especially evident online. Do you believe a certain politician is in the right? You'll naturally gravitate towards articles praising them, subconsciously overlooking any criticism. Social media algorithms pick up on this, feeding you even more of that content, and in doing so, creating an information bubble around you. Or consider any argument or debate. More often than not, we're listening to an opponent not to truly understand their perspective, but to pinpoint weaknesses in their arguments so we can formulate a counterattack. We're not seeking truth, we're gathering ammunition to reinforce our own viewpoint. And this isn't because we're inherently bad. It's simply easier for our brains to operate this way. Embracing new ideas and changing deeply held beliefs is incredibly energy intensive. It's far easier and more satisfying to receive confirmation that you were right all along. My absolute favourite, and perhaps the internet's most infamous, is the Dunning-Kruger Effect. In a nutshell, it's when an ignorant person doesn't know they're ignorant, precisely because of their ignorance. It sounds like a punchline, but it's a serious cognitive bias that's all around us. You've likely encountered individuals who have a shallow grasp of a subject, but discuss it with the unwavering conviction of an expert. They fail to grasp the subject's true complexity, unaware of its hidden pitfalls, which makes their world appear simple and straightforward. They simply lack the very knowledge required to recognize their own ignorance. This is the peak of the so-called Mount Stupid. Conversely, true experts and seasoned professionals often find themselves doubting their own abilities and knowledge. They keenly understand the vastness of what they still don't know and the immense depth of their field. Furthermore, they often assume that because something comes easily to them, it must be equally simple for everyone else. They underestimate the uniqueness of their skills. As a result, a paradoxical picture emerges. Dilettantes loudly proclaim their genius, while experts quietly sit in the valley of despair, reflecting on their imperfections. So, if you find yourself questioning your own understanding, perhaps that's a good sign. You likely know far more than you give yourself credit for. Let's take a closer look at the world of shopping and pricing. Have you ever caught yourself buying something, not because you desperately needed it, but simply because it was on an incredible sale? If so, then welcome to the trap of the anchoring effect. It's a surprisingly simple trick. Our brains are inherently lazy and prefer not to evaluate things in isolation. They need a reference point, an anchor to latch onto, and crucially, they tend to trust the very first piece of information they receive above all else. Imagine walking into a store and spotting a handbag priced at 50,000 rubles. Way too expensive, some you think, but right next to it there's a very similar bag, now priced at 15,000. Suddenly, compared to that initial figure, the second bag seems like an incredible bargain, even if 15,000 might still be an inflated price for it. That first, exorbitant price has set an anchor for your perception. This trick is employed everywhere. In restaurant menus, expensive dishes are often strategically placed at the top to make other options appear more affordable. When buying cars, salesmen frequently start with the fully loaded, top-of-the-line model. Even during salary negotiations, the first figure mentioned often becomes the anchor around which all subsequent discussions revolve. So, the next time you spot a crossed-out price tag, ask yourself, would I genuinely consider buying this item at this price if I hadn't seen the original higher one? The answer might just surprise you. Today, we're continuing our exploration of how our minds can mislead us. Tell me, which do you fear more, being attacked by a shark or getting hit by a falling coconut? Most people, without a second thought, would pick the shark. Yet, statistics actually show that coconuts are responsible for far more fatalities. Why is that? The answer lies in something called the availability heuristic. It's another mental shortcut our brain takes. It estimates the likelihood of an event not based on actual data, but on how easily examples come to mind. Our brain might be a terrible statistician, but it's an excellent storyteller. Consider the classic example, the fear of flying. The moment a news report about a plane crash hits, we immediately feel a surge of anxiety before our own upcoming flights. The images of the wreckage are often graphic and emotional, searing themselves into our memories. And when we consider air travel, that harrowing image is often the first thing that comes to mind. It's incredibly available. Yet car accidents happen daily, claiming far more lives. But they've become so commonplace they don't inspire blockbuster movies. This kind of information doesn't trigger strong emotions, which makes it less available for our brains to recall. Consequently, we hop into our cars without a second thought, yet feel anxious about flying. Ultimately, we tend to judge the world not as it objectively is, but as it's sensationalized in media and entertainment. Here's another common trap we fall into when trying to analyze success. It's called survivor bias. The name might sound a bit grim, but this bias subtly permeates every aspect of our lives, from business decisions to the everyday advice we give and receive. At its core, survivor bias means we draw conclusions based solely on the stories of the survivors, those who succeeded. We completely ignore the vast majority of the fallen, those who failed, simply because their stories aren't as widely known or celebrated. Take a classic example. We read biographies of Steve Jobs or Bill Gates, who dropped out of college and became billionaires. This can lead us to believe that skipping university is almost a guaranteed path to success. But we don't see the thousands or even millions of other people who also dropped out but never built their empires. Their stories simply aren't told. Or consider another instance. We marvel at old buildings, admiring the quality of construction from previous eras. But we rarely stop to think about how many structures from the same period simply didn't survive to our day because they were poorly built. We only see the survivors. This bias causes us to overestimate our chances of success and make risky decisions because we're operating with an incomplete view of reality. We focus on the winners, forgetting the true cost of their triumphs and the countless others who didn't make it. Now let's shift our focus to how we perceive other people. Our brains, it turns out, have a few interesting tricks up their sleeve here too. The first one we'll look at is the halo effect. Imagine meeting someone new and they happened to be incredibly attractive. What would you think of them? Most of us would subconsciously assign them other positive qualities too. We'll assume they're also smart, kind, successful, and have a great sense of humour. One prominent positive trait, in this case attractiveness, creates a radiant halo around the person, colouring our entire perception of them. This effect isn't limited to physical appearance. If we learn someone is a successful doctor, we might automatically assume they're also a great family person and an honest citizen. If someone makes a witty joke, we often conclude they must be highly intelligent too. Marketers and PR professionals absolutely love this effect. That's precisely why beautiful and famous actors endorse everything imaginable, from cars to banking services. Their positive image is effectively transferred to the product they represent. We're not just buying a watch, we're buying a slice of our favourite celebrity's lifestyle. So, the next time you find yourself captivated by someone at first glance, ask yourself, am I falling for their halo? But just as light casts a shadow, the halo effect has its darker twin, the horn effect, also known as the devil effect. It operates on the exact same principle, only in reverse. If the very first impression or piece of information we receive about someone is negative, it casts a shadow over all their other qualities. It's as if we instantly put imaginary horns on them. A single negative trait makes us doubt the entire person. For instance, you might learn that your new colleague dresses sloppily. Your brain could immediately fill in the gaps thinking, aha, so that means they're also lazy, irresponsible, and probably not very intelligent. Or perhaps someone makes a spelling error in a message and you instantly jump to conclusions about their overall intelligence. This effect is particularly dangerous during job interviews or on first dates. A single awkward gesture, a poorly timed joke, or a controversial opinion can completely spoil an impression, even if the person is otherwise a perfect fit. We latch onto this initial negative hook and then actively seek confirmation for our bad opinion, often ignoring all the positive aspects. Being aware of the horn effect means giving people a second chance and not jumping to conclusions based on a single detail we might not have liked. After all, as we've just seen, first impressions can often be deceiving. This next cognitive bias explains why we're such harsh judges of others, yet such skilled advocates for ourselves. It's called the fundamental attribution error. While the name sounds complex, the core idea is actually quite simple. When we try to explain someone else's behaviour, we tend to overemphasize their personal traits, their character, intentions, or personality, while significantly underestimating the role of the situation and external circumstances. For example, if a colleague shows up late for a meeting, our immediate thought often leaps to, how irresponsible and unpunctual can he be? We instantly attribute their tardiness to their inherent character. But what happens when we are the ones running late? We immediately find 1,000 external reasons. The traffic was horrendous. My alarm didn't go off. The elevator got stuck. We rarely, if ever, say, I'm late because I'm irresponsible. Instead, we attribute our own behaviour to circumstances completely beyond our control. This seemingly simple mechanism is the root cause of countless misunderstandings and conflicts. It leads us to perceive others as inherently flawed or ill-intentioned, while seeing ourselves as good people simply facing challenging circumstances. Essentially, we judge others by their actions, but ourselves by our intentions. Recognizing this common bias is the first crucial step towards becoming a more understanding and less judgmental individual. Let's talk about unfinished business and TV series that end on a cliffhanger. Why do they stick in our minds so intensely? We can thank Soviet psychologist Bluma Zygarnik and her discovery, the Zygarnik Effect. The story of its discovery is quite amusing. Zygarnik was sitting in a cafe and observed that waiters perfectly remembered every detail of unpaid orders. However, the moment a customer paid, the waiter would immediately forget everything they'd ordered. A completed action seemed to be erased from memory, while an unfinished one continued to occupy their working memory, creating a sense of tension. This effect works in all areas of our lives. We're troubled by conversations left unfinished. We're irritated by tasks we've started, but haven't completed. That's precisely why it's so difficult to stop thinking about a problem until it's finally resolved. And of course, content creators brilliantly capitalize on this. TV series with their cliffhangers are the classic Zygarnik effect in action. An open ending forces our brain to actively work, build theories, and eagerly await the continuation. The same principle applies to headlines like, "He just walked on stage, and what happened next shocked everyone." They create intrigue, a sense of incompleteness, and we simply can't help but click to close that mental loop. So now you know why it's so hard to turn off an episode halfway through. Now let's turn our attention to one of the most intriguing and, frankly, uncomfortable states of our mind: cognitive dissonance. It's that familiar sense of inner unease that arises when two contradictory ideas, beliefs, or values clash within us, or when our actions simply don't align with what we truly believe. A classic example is a smoker who knows that smoking is deadly. Two thoughts collide in their mind: "I smoke" and "smoking kills." This creates a powerful internal conflict. To alleviate this unpleasant feeling, there are several avenues they can explore. The first, and often the most challenging, is to change their behaviour. In this case, to quit smoking. However, our brain is a master of self-justification, so other strategies are often chosen. For example, one might alter their belief: "It's not that bad. My grandpa smoked until he was 90 and was perfectly fine." Or they might introduce a new belief to reconcile the conflict: "Sure, it's harmful, but it helps me cope with stress, and stress, in the long run, is even worse for me." We see the same phenomenon when we make an expensive yet ultimately unnecessary purchase. We then start convincing ourselves that we absolutely needed this item, and in fact, it was a smart investment. We're reluctant to admit our mistake because doing so would trigger that uncomfortable dissonance. It's simply easier to persuade ourselves we made the right choice. While this mechanism protects our self-esteem, it frequently prevents us from seeing reality for what it truly is. Now let's explore how crowds influence our behaviour. Picture this scenario. You're on a busy street and suddenly one person looks up. Chances are you'd probably ignore them. But what if 5 people are doing it? You'd almost certainly glance up yourself. And if 50 people are looking up, you'd follow suit instinctively, without a second thought. This is a classic example of the bandwagon effect, also known as herd mentality. As social beings, belonging to a group is incredibly important to us. That's why we tend to adopt beliefs, follow fashions, or jump on trends, simply because everyone else is doing it. It's a kind of mental shortcut. If enough people are doing something, it's probably correct and safe. It saves us the trouble of thinking and analysing for ourselves. This effect is at the heart of all fashion trends, viral challenges, and even political movements. In marketing, it's constantly exploited, showing us things like 9 out of 10 dentists recommend this, or highlighting a product as a bestseller. It's like they're saying, everyone else has already made their choice, so join in, don't miss out. The real danger, however, is that this effect can completely bypass our critical thinking. We start doing things not because we genuinely decided to, but simply to be like everyone else. Sometimes this is harmless, but other times it can lead to deeply regrettable consequences, especially when a crowd makes a wrong or even dangerous decision. Building on our discussion of groups, let's turn our attention to one of the most unsettling and terrifying social phenomena. It's known as the bystander effect, or Genovese syndrome. The core idea is simple, yet horrifying. The more people witness an emergency, say someone collapsing on the street, the less likely it is that any one of them will step in to help. You'd think it would be the opposite. More people should mean more help, but crowd psychology operates differently. What happens is something called diffusion of responsibility. Each individual witness thinks, there are so many people here, surely someone else has already called an ambulance? Or, why should I be the one to intervene? Responsibility gets diluted among everyone present, and in the end, no one does anything. Beyond that, people tend to look to others for cues. If everyone else is just standing around watching, a person might think, since no one else is panicking, it must not be that serious. This is known as pluralistic ignorance. Everyone feels confused, but each person believes everyone else is calm and understands the situation. This effect is a stark reminder that in a critical situation, you cannot rely on an anonymous crowd. If you need help, address someone directly. Hey, you in the red jacket, call an ambulance. This breaks the diffusion of responsibility and greatly boosts your odds of rescue. Here's a common trap that even the most rational people fall into, especially when it comes to time, money, or effort. It's called the sunk cost fallacy, or the Concorde effect. Imagine you've bought a movie ticket. You go to the cinema, the film starts, and just 20 minutes in, you realise it's incredibly dull and uninteresting. What do? Most people would stay and watch it to the end. Why? Because the money for the ticket has already been paid. These funds, already spent and unrecoverable, are precisely what we mean by sunk costs, and we desperately cling to them, forcing ourselves to continue doing something we dislike or that's clearly doomed to fail. It's as if we're trying to recoup our investment, when in reality, we're only making the situation worse by also wasting our time. This effect manifests everywhere. We finish a meal we don't enjoy at a restaurant because we paid for it. We keep reading a boring book because we've already read half of it. We stick with a failing business project for years because we've poured a lot of money into it. Or, even worse, we stay in unhappy relationships because we've already been together for so many years. The rational decision would be to ignore past costs and make decisions based on the current situation and future prospects. But our brain hates to admit losses. It's easier for it to keep us suffering than to acknowledge that the initial decision was a mistake. Now let's talk about things we make ourselves. Have you ever noticed how that slightly wobbly stool you built yourself seems far more valuable and even more beautiful than a perfectly crafted chair from a store? If so, you've just experienced what's known as the IKEA effect. It's no coincidence it's named after the Swedish furniture giant. Researchers have observed that people tend to value items they've put their own labour into creating or assembling far more highly, even if the end result is, to put it mildly, imperfect. This effect works because we start to perceive the item as an extension of ourselves, a continuation of our efforts. The very act of assembly, even if it was agonising and accompanied by muttered curses at confusing instructions, creates an emotional bond. That nightstand isn't just any nightstand. It's a testament to your patience, your persistence. It's your work. This is precisely why do-it-yourself kits are so popular. Everything from meal prep boxes to intricate model kits. Companies aren't just selling us a product. They're selling us the feeling of satisfaction and pride in a job well done. We're paying not only for the product itself, but for the opportunity to contribute our own effort. So, the next time your friend proudly shows off a slightly wobbly cabinet they've put together, don't be quick to laugh. To them, that cabinet is a genuine work of art. Let's dive into some common social anxieties. Have you ever been on your way to an important meeting, only to suddenly spot a tiny stain on your shirt, and for the rest of the evening, did it feel like everyone in the room was staring right at it, judging you? Or perhaps you misspoke during a presentation, convinced that it became the sole topic of conversation for every single person in the audience. That unsettling feeling, like you're under a glaring spotlight with everyone scrutinizing your every flaw and mistake, is what we call the spotlight effect. The good news is, it's all just an illusion. In reality, most people around us simply don't care as much as we think. Studies show we tend to overestimate how much attention others are paying to us by roughly twofold. Others are far too preoccupied with their own thoughts, their own problems, and their own spots on their shirts to be scrutinizing you. This effect stems from the fact that we are the absolute center of our own universe. We're constantly analyzing ourselves, and we mistakenly believe everyone else is doing the same. We can't truly step outside our own heads and see things from another person's perspective. So, the next time you find yourself obsessing over a minor detail in your appearance or behavior, just remember the spotlight effect and take a deep breath. Chances are, nobody even noticed anything at all, and if they did, they probably forgot about it 5 seconds later. So, why do bad news and negative events affect us so profoundly? Why does a single piece of criticism often overshadow 10 compliments? And why can one unpleasant incident spoil our mood for an extended period despite countless good moments? The answer lies in what psychologists call negativity bias, or negative asymmetry. At its core, this cognitive bias means our brains give significantly more weight and attention to negative experiences, thoughts, and emotions than to positive ones. It's an evolutionary mechanism, a survival trait passed down from our ancestors. In the wild, quickly spotting a predator lurking in the bushes was far more crucial for survival than noticing a beautiful flower. Ignoring a potential threat could cost you your life, whereas overlooking something pleasant carried no such risk. This ancient software still runs in our minds today. It's why we often fixate on our mistakes, why negative headlines in the media grab more attention, and why we tend to dwell on hurts longer than on moments of joy. A single sharp comment from a boss can ruin our entire day, even if 5 colleagues praised us just moments before. One bad date can leave us feeling like a failure for an entire week. Understanding this bias is the first crucial step toward countering its effects. It's vital to consciously train ourselves to notice and appreciate positive moments, refusing to let a single negative event cast a shadow over our entire lives. Now let's explore one of the most intriguing and mysterious phenomena of the human mind, the placebo effect. You've likely heard of it. It's when someone is given a dummy pill, say, a sugar tablet, but told it's a powerful medication. And, remarkably, they genuinely start to feel better. The placebo effect isn't just make-believe or simple self-persuasion. It's a real, measurable psychophysiological phenomenon. MRI scans have shown that when a person takes a placebo, the same brain regions responsible for producing natural painkillers, endorphins, become active. In essence, the brain, by believing in the treatment, starts to heal the body itself. The power of this effect is truly remarkable. It doesn't just work with pills. Studies show that more expensive placebos are often more effective than cheaper ones, and placebo injections can be more potent than pills. Even sham surgeries, where a surgeon might only make an incision, can provide the same relief as genuine procedures. All of this demonstrates just how profoundly our expectations and beliefs can influence our physical state. When we genuinely believe in healing, our brain taps into the body's intrinsic healing mechanisms. The placebo effect is a striking illustration that the line between mind and body is far blurrier than we've often been led to believe. Our belief truly has the power to work wonders. But the potent power of the placebo has a shadowy twin, the nocebo effect. It operates on the exact same principles of belief and expectation, but with precisely the opposite outcome. If someone believes something will cause them harm, their body can actually manifest those negative symptoms. A classic example is the side effects listed for medications. Every package insert includes a lengthy list of potential adverse reactions. Highly suggestible individuals, after reading through this list, often begin to experience all those symptoms, even if they're only taking a placebo. Their brain, anticipating a negative reaction, essentially creates it. The nocebo effect can also manifest on a more global scale. For instance, if news reports describe an outbreak of a disease with specific symptoms, some individuals, despite not being infected, may begin to experience those very symptoms. Their fear and anticipation of illness materialize on a physical level. Even a doctor's words can act as a nocebo. If a doctor tells a patient, "This procedure will be very painful," that patient is likely to experience significantly more pain than if they were simply told, "You might feel a slight discomfort." The nocebo effect is a powerful reminder that our negative expectations and fears can harm us just as much as real viruses or physical injuries. The power of words and thoughts can not only heal, but also hurt. Now let's talk about horoscopes, fortune telling, and those popular personality tests. Why do millions of people read these vague, generic descriptions and confidently exclaim, "Yes, that's me exactly"? The answer lies in the Barnum effect, which is also known as the theyre effect or the Pollyanna principle. Essentially, it's the phenomenon where people tend to rate highly the accuracy of personality descriptions, believing they were crafted specifically for them, when in reality, these descriptions are broad enough to apply to a vast number of individuals. Psychologist Bertram Theurer conducted a classic experiment. He administered a personality test to his students, then gave every single one of them the exact same result, which he had pulled from a horoscope. It included phrases like, "You have a strong need for other people to like and admire you. At times you are very self-critical, and while you have some personal weaknesses, you are generally able to compensate for them." He then asked the students to rate how accurately this description fit them on a 5-point scale. The average rating was an astonishing 4.26. Almost everyone felt it was an incredibly accurate portrait of their own personality. This effect works because we instinctively seek confirmation, focusing on the phrases that resonate with us while easily overlooking those that don't. Astrologers, palm readers, and the creators of pseudo-psychological tests are truly masters of the Barnum effect. They give us what we want to hear, and we readily believe in their supposed insight. Our next cognitive trap makes us believe we're the captains of our own destiny, even when we're merely adrift on an uncontrollable raft. It's known as the illusion of control. This is our tendency to overestimate our ability to influence events that are, in reality, random and entirely beyond our grasp. This illusion manifests in various, sometimes rather amusing forms. Take, for instance, a casino gambler who throws the dice harder when they need a high number and softer when they're hoping for a low one. Deep down, they subconsciously believe the force of their throw can actually influence the outcome. Or consider the football fan glued to their TV in a lucky jersey, refusing to change position because they're convinced it's helping their team win. And then there's the person repeatedly pressing the pedestrian crossing button, believing it will somehow speed up the green light, even though, more often than not, that button is merely a placebo. The illusion of control offers us a sense of security and comfort in an otherwise unpredictable world. It's often more comforting to believe we have some influence over a situation than to admit that much of our lives is simply left to chance. While this illusion can be beneficial, motivating us to take action, it also carries dangers. It can lead us to take unwarranted risks, for instance, in gambling or on the stock market, where we might mistakenly believe we can predict random fluctuations. There's a fascinating psychological phenomenon that turns ordinary items into treasures the moment they become ours. It's known as the endowment effect. At its core, it means we place a significantly higher value on something simply because we own it. A classic experiment illustrates this perfectly. One group of people is given ordinary coffee mugs. Another group is offered the chance to buy identical mugs. Then the first group is asked how much they would sell their mug for, while the second group is asked how much they would pay for one. The results are consistently striking. On average, the owners of the mugs quote a selling price 2, or even 3, times higher than what the buyers are willing to pay. It's the exact same mug, but for one group it's just a commodity, while for the other it's my mug. This effect is explained by several factors. Firstly, we strongly dislike losing what we already possess, a concept known as loss aversion. Parting with an item feels like a loss, and this loss is perceived as more painful than the pleasure derived from acquiring an identical item. Secondly, the item becomes associated with us, almost becoming a part of our identity. The endowment effect manifests everywhere. From selling a used car that, to us, seems almost new, to our reluctance to get rid of old clutter. We simply cannot objectively evaluate what we consider ours. Let's talk about choice. It might seem like the more options we have, the better, right? More freedom, a greater chance to find that perfect fit. But surprisingly, psychology tells a different story. This phenomenon is known as the paradox of choice. At its core, it suggests that an overwhelming number of choices doesn't actually make us happier. Instead, it often leads to decision paralysis and leaves us feeling dissatisfied with the outcome. The famous jam experiment perfectly illustrates this concept. Imagine 2 grocery stores. One offered customers a selection of 6 jam flavours to sample, while the other presented a staggering 24. Which one saw more sales? Surprisingly, it was the store with only 6 options. While the display of 24 jars certainly drew more people to the counter, most ended up walking away empty-handed. The sheer volume of choice proved to be too overwhelming and exhausting. Even when we do manage to pick something from a vast array of choices, we often find ourselves less satisfied. We start to second-guess. Was that other option better? Did I perhaps miss out on the perfect one? When the choices are limited, it's easier to decide, and we feel much more confident in our final selection. This paradox helps explain why we can spend hours endlessly scrolling through restaurant menus or online shopping catalogues, only to end up feeling more drained than delighted. Sometimes, less truly is more. This next phenomenon proves that how information is presented can sometimes be more important than its content, especially when that form is poetic. Meet the rhyme as reason effect. Its essence is incredibly simple. Statements that rhyme often seem more truthful, accurate, and convincing to us than the exact same statements presented in prose. Rhyme gives a phrase weight, a sense of completeness, and an inherent rightness. Think of famous proverbs and sayings like, "You can't pull a fish from a pond without effort," or "Go slow, go far." They sound so catchy and polished that we accept them as undeniable truths, often without even stopping to consider their actual meaning. Now imagine if they sounded like this. To retrieve a fish from a body of water, effort is required. The impact just isn't the same, is it? Advertisers and marketers masterfully exploit this effect. Slogans like Gillette, "The best a man can get," or "Tide's in, dirt's out," become memorable and persuasive precisely because of their rhyme. This cognitive bias works because rhyming phrases are processed more easily by our brains. They feel more familiar and right to our ears. So, the next time you hear a clever rhyming argument, pause for a second. You might be getting persuaded not by logic, but merely by the magic of poetry. Now let's talk about our inner rebel. Have you ever noticed that the moment something is forbidden or imposed on you, you start craving it even more, even if you were completely indifferent to it before? This phenomenon is known as psychological reactance. It's our automatic response to a perceived threat to our freedom of choice. When we feel someone is trying to control, limit, or dictate something to us, our spirit of defiance awakens. We start doing the exact opposite, simply to assert our independence and autonomy. Teenagers are a classic example. The more parents forbid something, the stronger their desire for it becomes. The forbidden fruit is always sweetest, after all. But this doesn't just apply to children. Overly pushy advertising, shouting "buy, buy, buy," can trigger a strong aversion in us, making us want to buy anything, but that particular product. Or when a politician aggressively pressures us to vote for them, we might, out of principle, cast our vote for their opponent instead. This mechanism is a kind of psychological immune system. It protects us from manipulation and attempts to strip us of our free will. But sometimes it plays a trick on us, pushing us to make illogical and even harmful decisions, simply out of spite. Clever manipulators know this and use reverse psychology, subtly nudging us towards their desired choice by pretending to dissuade us from it. Let's dive into one of the most common cognitive biases, something absolutely everyone has experienced: the planning fallacy. At its core, it's our remarkable ability to systematically underestimate the time needed for a task, even when we've done similar things countless times and always ended up behind schedule. We're convinced this report will only take an hour. Renovating a room. We'll get it done this weekend. Studying for an exam. One last night of cramming will be enough. But in reality, an hour stretches into 3, a weekend into a week, and that final night often turns into a sleepless, panicked blur. Why does this happen? Firstly, we're inherently optimistic. When we plan, we envision an ideal scenario. Everything goes smoothly, no one distracts us, and no unforeseen problems arise. We're essentially planning in a vacuum. Secondly, we often fail to account for our past experiences. Even if we've done similar work 100 times and it always took 5 hours, our brain somehow convinces itself that this time we'll magically get it done in 2. We simply don't learn from our own mistakes. This cognitive bias is the root cause of missed deadlines, constant tardiness, and relentless stress. The only way to combat it is to stop trusting our initial intuitive time estimates. Instead, multiply them by at least 2 and always build in a buffer for unforeseen circumstances. Have you ever noticed how a song that initially grated on your nerves suddenly starts to grow on you after hearing it 100 times on the radio? Or how the face of someone you regularly encounter begins to seem more appealing over time? This phenomenon is known as the mere exposure effect, or the familiarity principle. The core idea is simple. We tend to like things that are familiar to us. The more frequently we encounter a neutral, or even initially slightly negative stimulus, be it a person, a melody, a word, or an image, the more likely it is to elicit a positive feeling or liking from us. This effect is a cornerstone of all modern advertising. Marketers understand this. Even if you despise intrusive ads, their primary goal isn't to make you like them, but simply to remain constantly visible. A logo you see every day starts to feel familiar, and when you're in a store, faced with a choice among a dozen unfamiliar brands, your hand will likely reach for the one you already recognize. Familiar equals safe, a deeply ingrained survival mechanism from our ancestors. The same principle applies to social interactions. People we see more frequently tend to appear more attractive and trustworthy to us. That's why regular meetings and interactions are so crucial for maintaining both friendships and professional relationships. The mere exposure effect subtly, yet powerfully, shapes our tastes and preferences, proving that repetition isn't just the mother of learning, but also the mother of liking. Now let's dive into the fascinating depths of our memory and explore a phenomenon known as cryptomnesia. The name might sound like something out of a sci-fi movie, but it's actually a pretty common memory glitch. Cryptomnesia is when you genuinely believe someone else's idea, thought, or even a melody originated with you. This isn't an act of deliberate deception or malicious intent. You simply forget where you encountered the information, but the content itself sticks in your mind. Then, when it resurfaces, your brain genuinely believes it just generated that thought or idea. You could call it accidental plagiarism. It's something we all experience. You might tell a friend a joke they told you just last week, or present a brilliant idea at work that you actually read in an article yesterday. Many musicians and writers have faced accusations of plagiarism precisely because of cryptomnesia. They might have heard a melody somewhere, forgotten about it, and then years later, it popped into their head feeling completely new and original. This phenomenon, highlights just how complex and imperfect the memory process can be. Our brains don't store information with clear mine or yours tags. Sometimes these tags simply get misplaced, and suddenly other people's thoughts begin to feel like our very own. Building on our discussion of memory's unreliability, let's explore the misinformation effect. This phenomenon strikingly illustrates that our memories aren't precise video recordings of the past, but rather constantly edited and rewritten scripts. At its core, the misinformation effect highlights how information we encounter after an event can subtly weave itself into our existing memories, altering them, sometimes beyond recognition. Psychologist Elizabeth Loftus's classic experiment perfectly demonstrates this. Participants were shown a video of a car accident. Then one group was asked, how fast were the cars going when they hit each other? The second group was asked, how fast were the cars going when they smashed into each other? Those who heard the word smashed estimated the car's speed significantly higher. But the most fascinating part came a week later, when participants were asked if they had seen any broken glass in the video. Those who heard smashed were much more likely to say yes, even though there was no broken glass in the footage. A single word had altered their memories. This effect has immense implications for the legal system. It reveals just how unreliable witness testimonies can be, as their recollections can be swayed by leading questions from investigators, information from the media, or even conversations with other eyewitnesses. Our memory isn't a vault, it's more like malleable clay. Now cast your mind back to any significant past event, perhaps the outcome of a crucial sports match or election results. Doesn't it seem to you now that the conclusion was absolutely obvious and predictable from the very beginning? If so, you've fallen victim to a cognitive bias known as hindsight bias, or more commonly, the I knew it all along effect. This cognitive trap makes us perceive events that have already happened as far more predictable than they truly were before they occurred. The past viewed in the rearview mirror always appears clear, logical, and orderly. Once we know the final outcome, our brain starts reinterpreting all previous facts to fit it. It constructs a neat chain of causes and effects that leads directly to that result, while conveniently ignoring all the data that might have pointed to a different possibility. All the uncertainty and chaos of the original situation vanish, replaced by an illusion of order. This effect is evident everywhere. Financial analysts, after a market crash, confidently explain why it was inevitable. Historians describe wars as if their outcomes were predetermined. And we ourselves, looking back at our own past mistakes, chastise ourselves. How could I have been so blind? It was all so clear. But in truth, it wasn't obvious at all. Our brain is simply a masterful editor, retrospectively transforming a convoluted story with an open ending into a simple, instructive tale. This psychological phenomenon underpins much of propaganda, advertising and public opinion formation. It demonstrates how a lie, repeated often enough, can indeed start to feel like the truth in our minds. It's formally known as the illusion of truth, or the illusory truth effect. Essentially, we're predisposed to believe statements we encounter frequently, regardless of their actual factual basis. Repeated exposure fosters a sense of familiarity, which our brains often mistakenly interpret as a marker of truth or reliability. The internal logic seems to be, if I've heard this before, it must be common knowledge, and therefore, it probably holds some validity. Studies consistently demonstrate that even when individuals are initially aware that a claim is false, repeated exposure can lead them to doubt their initial knowledge and eventually accept it as fact. Our brains are wired to prefer the ease and comfort of processing familiar information over the constant, effortful task of analysing and scrutinising every fact. This very effect forms the bedrock of countless advertising campaigns that relentlessly repeat the same slogan. It's also central to political messaging, where slogans are relentlessly hammered into the minds of voters through every available channel. Eventually, we cease to critically analyse their meaning and simply accept these phrases as established truths or common wisdom. This cognitive trap serves as a powerful reminder of the critical importance of engaging our analytical minds. Before you unquestioningly accept information, especially when it's being echoed from every possible direction, it's vital to pause and ask yourself, is this truly factual? Or am I just perceiving it as true because I've heard it countless times before? Let's explore the incredible power of expectations and how they can literally shape our reality. This is often referred to as the Pygmalion effect, also known as the Rosenthal effect, or a self-fulfilling prophecy. It's a phenomenon where our expectations of another person subtly influence their behaviour, ultimately causing those very expectations to be fulfilled. The name itself comes from the ancient Greek myth of Pygmalion, a sculptor who fell so deeply in love with a statue of a beautiful woman he created that she miraculously came to life. In a psychological context, it works in a similar vein. Our belief in an individual can bring to life the very qualities we anticipate seeing in them. A classic illustration of this is Rosenthal's famous experiment conducted in a school setting. Psychologists administered IQ tests to a group of students. They then told the teachers that certain students had shown exceptional potential and were on the verge of an intellectual growth spurt. In reality, the so-called gifted children had been selected entirely at random. But what happened a year later? Astonishingly, those very promising students showed a genuine and significant increase in their IQ scores, far outperforming their peers. Why? Because the teachers, holding higher expectations for them, unconsciously treated them differently. They gave them more attention, provided more challenging assignments, offered more praise, and generally provided greater support. Through their altered behaviour and belief, the teachers inadvertently created an environment where these children could truly flourish and reach their full potential. Crucially, this effect also works in reverse. If expectations are low, or if nothing is expected at all, individuals are far less likely to push themselves or strive for achievement. Our expectations are far more than just thoughts in our heads. They are a powerful, double-edged sword, capable of inspiring individuals to incredible achievements, or conversely, of subtly undermining their confidence and potential. The following phenomenon highlights a crucial point. It's not just what is said, but how. It's said that truly matters. This is known as the framing effect, a cognitive bias where the way information is presented significantly influences our perception and decisions, often more powerfully than the actual content itself. The same situation, when described using different words, can elicit completely opposite reactions from us. We tend to react to the frame in which the information is placed, rather than to the picture, the core content itself. Here's a classic example. Imagine you're buying ground beef. On one package, it says 80% meat, 20% fat. On another, it reads 80% lean. Which one would you choose? The vast majority of people would opt for the second package, even though, in essence, both descriptions refer to the exact same product. The term 80% lean creates a positive perception, whereas highlighting 20% fat evokes a negative one. Similarly, the news that a medication is effective in 90% of cases is received far more positively than the statement that, in 10% of cases, the medication is not effective. Or consider an economic development program, one that will create 100,000 new jobs, sounds significantly more appealing than one that merely will reduce the unemployment rate by 1%. Politicians, marketers, and journalists are all expert practitioners of framing. They skillfully package information within the desired frame to guide us towards a specific conclusion or decision. Understanding this effect empowers us to look beyond the clever packaging of words and discern the core message. Here's another phenomenon that shows how our perception of the world is far from objective and deeply context-dependent: the contrast effect. At its core, it means we don't evaluate quality based on absolute standards, but by comparing it to what's presented alongside it, or what we've just experienced. Our perception truly adheres to the idea that everything is understood through comparison. For example, a grey square on a black background will appear much lighter to us than the exact same grey square on a white background. The square itself hasn't changed, only the contrast has. This principle is constantly used in sales. A car salesperson, for instance, might first show you the most expensive luxury model. After that, the price of a standard model, which isn't cheap on its own, will seem perfectly reasonable, even a good deal. Or take a real estate agent keen on selling you a particular house. They might first show you a couple of overtly bad, run-down options at a similar price. Against that backdrop, the target house will look like a palace. The contrast effect also applies to people. An average-looking person will seem highly attractive in a group of unattractive people, and vice versa. We don't evaluate things and people in a vacuum. Our judgment always depends on a reference point, which is either intentionally set for us or arises purely by chance. Now let's explore a powerful motivator that often makes us act quickly, and sometimes even irrationally. It's the principle of scarcity. Its formula is simple. The scarcer, more limited, or harder to obtain a resource is, the more valuable it seems to us. The potential to lose something motivates us far more powerfully than the opportunity to gain. This fear of missing out, or FOMO, is an incredibly potent motivator. Marketers absolutely love this principle and leverage it at every turn. Phrases like today only, limited stock, only 2 spots left, or exclusive offer just for you are classic examples of creating artificial scarcity. Website countdown timers announcing when a special offer ends directly target this inherent fear. Scarcity isn't just about limited quantities, it can also be about time. Information presented as secret or exclusive often seems more valuable and truthful. We inherently want what others can't have because it often boosts our social status. This principle is deeply ingrained from our ancestors, for whom a rare resource, like a food source, was genuinely vital for survival. However, in the modern world, this instinct often works against us, compelling us to buy unnecessary things and make hasty decisions, simply because of the fear that it might not be available later. This next principle sheds light on why we feel so awkward saying no to someone who's done us a favour, and why free samples in stores are such a powerful tool. It's the principle of reciprocity, often called the rule of give and take. This is one of the most fundamental norms of human society. Essentially, it states that we feel compelled to reciprocate. A favour for a favour, a gift for a gift, a concession for a concession. When someone does us a good turn, an internal sense of debt arises, and that feeling can be quite unsettling. This principle is actively leveraged across many different fields. For example, imagine a supermarket promoter offering you a free sample of cheese. You take it, and just like that, you feel a slight sense of obligation. It becomes significantly harder to simply walk away without buying anything, or perhaps a colleague helps you out with a report. The next time they ask for a favour, you'd feel incredibly uncomfortable saying no, even if you're swamped with work. The power of this principle is that it often kicks in automatically, bypassing our rational thought processes. What's more, the return favour can be far more substantial than the initial one we received. A small, unexpected gift can compel us to make significant concessions. Understanding this rule helps us on one hand build stronger relationships, and on the other, recognise manipulation, especially when an unsolicited favour is offered merely to make us feel indebted. There's an interesting psychological effect that explains why, after doing something good, we're often tempted to do something less virtuous or even harmful. It's known as moral credentialing or moral licensing. Essentially, it means that when we do something that boosts our self-esteem and strengthens our image as a good person, we subconsciously grant ourselves an internal permission, a license, to later relax a little and indulge in something less virtuous or even a bit undisciplined. For example, imagine you've spent the morning at the gym, feeling accomplished. Your brain might tell you, "You worked so hard, you deserve a reward." And just like that, with a clear conscience, you might indulge in a huge slice of cake, easily cancelling out your entire workout in terms of calories. Your good deed, the exercise, essentially gave you moral permission for a less desirable one, like overeating. This same principle applies in many other areas. Someone who just donated money to charity might feel more inclined to cheat a little, or be less honest in a minor interaction. Or perhaps someone who ate exclusively healthy food all day suddenly feels justified in grabbing a bag of chips in the evening. It's as if we keep an internal moral ledger. When you do something good, you essentially add to your moral credit. Then you feel you can spend some of that credit by doing something less ideal. This mental trap often prevents us from being consistent in our good intentions and can undermine all our efforts towards self-improvement. We take one step forward, only to immediately grant ourselves permission to take one step back. Now let's explore another intriguing cognitive bias related to our social perception. It's called the illusion of transparency. This is our tendency to overestimate how well other people can understand our thoughts, feelings and emotions. We often feel as though our inner state, whether it's anxiety, a lie, being in love, or irritation, is plainly visible, almost written all over our face, and obvious to everyone around us. We feel transparent. A classic example is public speaking. When we're on stage, feeling incredibly nervous, with our heart pounding and palms sweating, we're convinced that everyone in the audience can see our fear. We believe our voice is trembling and our face gives everything away. Yet in truth, most listeners likely don't notice even a fraction of our actual anxiety. The same applies when we try to lie. We're convinced our deception is transparent, easily seen through, and that anyone will immediately catch us. Or, when we try to hide our attraction to someone, we're sure our glances and smiles are shouting our feelings to the world. In reality, people are far worse at deciphering our inner states than we tend to believe. We're trapped inside our own heads, acutely feeling every single emotion and experience. But to the outside world, these are far less obvious. Grasping this simple truth can significantly reduce social anxiety. There's no need to constantly fret over what others might be thinking of you. Chances are, they aren't thinking about you nearly as much as you imagine. Finally, the last effect on our list is a powerful force that keeps us from embracing change and makes us cling to the familiar. It's known as the status quo bias. Essentially, this bias means we prefer things to stay exactly as they are. Any change to the current situation feels risky and potentially leads to losses. The familiar and habitual, even if imperfect, is perceived as much safer and more comfortable than anything new and unknown. This bias explains why people stick with the same bank or mobile provider for years, even when there are clearly more advantageous offers on the market. The process of switching feels too complicated and bothersome, and the outcome seems unpredictable. It's simply easier to leave everything as it is. The same applies to our careers. We might remain in a job we dislike, yet it's stable, fearing to venture into the unknown, even if a new role promises far greater prospects. We're choosing the bird in hand. The status quo bias is, in essence, a manifestation of our brain's inherent laziness and its strong aversion to loss. Any action or change represents a potential risk, while inaction feels like the safe, default choice. This powerful force hinders our growth, prevents us from trying new things, and ultimately stops us from improving our lives, keeping us confined to a comfort zone that can, over time, easily turn into a stagnant swamp. And here's the truly shocking part, the one that ties many of these effects together. Remember the fundamental attribution error. We judge others by their actions, but ourselves by our intentions. Someone cuts you off on the road, and they're a reckless jerk. But if you cut someone off, it's because you were in a genuine hurry for a good reason. This simple bias is at the root of countless conflicts, resentments, and misunderstandings in families, at work, and in friendships. We live in a world where everyone sees themselves as the good guy caught in tough circumstances, while everyone else is just a character with a bad attitude. And what about the sunk cost fallacy? It's not just about finishing a boring TV show. It makes people stay in jobs they hate for years, just because so much time has already been invested. It pushes companies to pour millions into failing projects. It traps people in toxic relationships because we've been through so much together. This effect literally dictates our wallets, careers and destinies, forcing us to cling to the past and fear the future. Realizing this is that very aha moment that can change everything. As you can see, our brain isn't some perfect computer. It's lazy, constantly looking for shortcuts, and all these effects are just the result of its optimization. They don't make us bad or stupid, they simply make us human. But knowledge is power. Now that you're aware of these traps, you can spot them in yourself and in others. And that means making more conscious, informed decisions. Thanks for watching this video all the way to the end. If you recognised yourself in even one of these points and found this interesting, please give it a like. And make sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss our future explorations into the mysteries of our mind. Now, a question for you. Which psychological effect do you most often notice in your own life or in the behaviour of those around you? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to read your stories.